Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. We have another Evercade review, one that I have been kind of neglectful on, and that is the Indie Collection 1. We'll get into these a little bit deeper, but initially, from my impressions of what I've been able to play of these so far, is I kind of have mixed feelings on some of them. And some of that didn't come from actually playing the games themselves, but from things that I learned after I played them and went digging for more information. And the reason I did that is because most of these are done by small development houses or like father-son, father-daughter teams, which is great and information I want to convey to you guys about some of those games, but it also led me down the rabbit hole of other avenues of which you can play these that aren't necessarily on the Evercade cart. But before we get too deep into that, welcome to the channel and the review and process. So, without further ado, go ahead and get started. Alright, the first of these games we're going to talk about is Alien Cat 2. This is a fun little title that reminds me a lot of like The Adventure of Lolo and that kind of thing, where you're sort of in a room and you have puzzles and things like that you have to solve with hazards and all that that can kill your character or one of your clones, as pops up kind of later on in the game. Now, the purpose of this is pretty simple. The cat himself lands on an alien planet, starts looking over his ship between him and his goldfish, thinking about how he's going to repair his ship. A bunch of aliens walk up to him and he all basically goes, nope, opens a portal and darts out, and decides to start fresh with building a brand new ship. The purpose of each stage is to find a component or series of components you can use to make part of your ship. There's a pretty significant number of levels on this, with increasing complexity, with increasing number of clones, traps, spikes, things of that nature, all sorts of things that can pop up that can hinder your progress in this game. It's a cute little pick up and play game, very focused on puzzle solving and exiting the room to go into the next room, with the end goal obviously being to escape the planet. So you can actually say it's got a little bit of Toe Jam and Earl influence on it in that respect. However, nothing in this seems to be procedurally generated. Everything has normal layouts and things of that nature. Overall, I really like this game. This was released in 2020, originally meant for the Genesis/Mega Drive, and you can still, I believe, get physical copies of this if you want it for your Genesis and or Mega Drive. This is also available outside of this cart on Steam. It's not that expensive. I want to say it's like $10 or less to be able to pick up this particular title. I enjoyed my time quite a bit with this title, what I've been able to play with. I think this is one of the ones that my wife will particularly enjoy if she decides to pick it up and play it. It's easy to pick up, it's easy to kind of understand what you need to do, but kind of complicated in some ways on how you do it the deeper you get into the game, which is what you expect and want out of a puzzle game like this. The art style is great, the animations are great, I think the characters are pretty adorable, and I like the way you go about preparing your ship and how cute that little cut sequence is. Overall, this one is a definite thumbs up from me. I'm looking forward to playing more of this title. Maybe setting up a couple save states because I play it in fits and spurts and then put it down, and I don't want to go all the way back to the beginning or have to play it all in one shot. I just don't play games that way anymore for the most part unless I'm streaming them or really focused on something on the weekend. So for me, being able to have the save states on this one is great because there's no codes or saving after each stage that I saw in this game. So if it's fairly long, you may want to try to use save states on this one after or before stage, that kind of thing. That way you kind of, you know, can pick up and go and move back and forth however you want. But definitely recommend this one. It's quite a bit of fun. So let's talk about Nguna. This one's kind of an interesting case. I actually really like this game. I found this one quite a bit of fun. I'm hoping there's more weapons and items in it, because from what little I played of it, I got out of the first dungeon area and was in the overworld area exploring, but all I had was my sword and whatever random item I had, be it a potion or something like that, that I could activate. There didn't really seem to be a lot of weapons. From the research that I did, there's 4 or 5 different weapons and multiple different dungeons. Each one of the dungeons is kind of laid out in a very overhead isometric way, like Zelda, the original Legend of Zelda, or Secret of Mana. It reminds me a little bit of both. This was actually made for the Game Boy Advance, pretty much initially, and you could get it as a cart on that. Right now, it's available on Tallbirds.com's website, where you can actually download it for free. Yeah, I said free. Or you can pay $50 for a physical cart if you want a GBA cart, which is pretty pricey for a GBA cart, but there's not a lot of people making GBA carts now, so I imagine it's like small manufacturing, so that's probably why the cost. My big problem with this game isn't that it's not a good game, it's actually a very fun game. I quite like it. I want to spend more time on it, particularly if I can throw it into... Heck, I might download it and throw it onto my Steam Deck, just because I can, or play it on my Evercade handheld, because it seems like that kind of game, particularly since it's built for like GBA. I think it would work very well there. My main crux with this comes down to the fact that you can download it for free, and I paid $20 for this cart, and this game's free. So that's not a dig against the game, that's more a dig against the cart, which is kind of why I have a love-hate relationship with this particular cart, is because the more I dug into it, the more some of these games are just straight up free. Like, they cost nothing to get your hands on, and a lot of these you can get on other platforms outside of Evercade or getting the physical cart. One of the reasons I really wanted this indie collection was to be able to get a hold of some of these games that you can't just necessarily download the ROM and play it. They sold them in limited quantities in a physical cart, and since I missed out on that opportunity, I wanted this not only to support those developers, but to have an actual physical copy of the game myself, thinking I didn't have that many options in order to get them. I'm finding that the more I dig into this cart, and the more knowledge I gain about it, that's not necessarily the case. And this is one of the prime examples and one of the most offending examples, because this guy just wants you to play his game. And he's happy enough to just give it to you. And if you want to donate, that's great. If you want to buy a physical cart, that's even better. The fact that you buy it on the Evercade cart and he probably gets a little bit of money from that is also good. So I'm not too frustrated by it, because I feel like the guy put in enough work and the game's nice enough that he deserves to make some money off of it. I'm sort of annoyed that they're putting games on there that I feel like they might have been able to just put on the cart for free. Hopefully they gave him some sort of compensation deal on this, rather than just, hey, look, this one's free, we're just going to put it on our cart. I really hope that's not the case. Blaze seems pretty much an upstanding company, so I'm hoping that's not it. But regardless, this game is fun, the enemies are neat, they're cute, there's a lot of attention to detail done on this game. The main character, it looks really good. The enemies are nice and fun to fight. It's very satisfying to kill some of them, particularly some of the orc ones that will charge you, or some of the bigger monsters. They're just fun to fight, and it's a neat, interesting game. It even has some throwbacks to Doom with like yellow keys and red keys and things like that. I really feel like the guy was not only influenced by like Zelda and Secret of Mana, but also Doom. Because the guy kind of looks like the Doom guy, and you're picking up some keys like Doom guy picks up. So it's kind of an interesting mix of influences in this game, and definitely worth checking out. It's fun, it's easy to pick up, it looks good, it plays good. Just a good game, and it's an RPG. I mean, that's one of the things that I've not seen too much on this system, is RPGs. Blaze hasn't thrown a ton of those out there. You've had a few Gauntlet style games, but not a lot of Zelda style or Secret of Mana style RPGs in there, and less turn-based RPGs. So having more RPGs out there is a very good thing. So this one's definitely worthwhile. I was very pleased with this one on the card. So the next one up that we're going to take a look at is called Chainbreak. This was a homebrew game designed for the Game Boy, as you can probably tell by the footage that's probably up right about now. Now this one's kind of interesting, but not necessarily my favorite, mostly because of the game type, not because of the design. I think doing a Game Boy game in this day and age, particularly an action-focused one, is actually quite good. And doing one within the limitations of the original Game Boy is even harder. There's just not much there to work with. This one's pretty interesting. It starts off pretty simple, and it extends to explain the basics by just putting text on the ground rather than throwing you into lengthy tutorials. So as you're playing the game, they're explaining the game as you're running through the stage and showing you how to play the game at the same time. It will progressively ramp things up, introduce new things, and it will tell you basically how you need to handle those things as you go through the various different stages. Now, there's a couple of things that are of note of this game is you have like speed ups and slow downs, which can both be helpful. You have things like saws and spikes and barriers and stuff like that that you have to leap over. Your momentum has effect on the game, meaning if you hit a speed boost and then you jump, you're going to jump further than you would without it. However, you can run out of oxygen, which makes me think you're using an oxygen tank of some sort to survive on whatever planet you're on, because the idea is to escape this prison and get out of wherever you're at. It's a pretty simple premise with some fairly tricky platforming and running techniques that you have to use to be able to get the heck out of Dodge. There's also coins and things like that, which during my limited playtime I didn't find much of a use for. I don't know if that's more of just for like scoring, or if there's going to be a shop where maybe you can stock up on oxygen or get power boosts and things like that. I only made it through like 5 to 7 stages on the game, so I didn't get very deep on it. For what it is, it's pretty interesting. It wouldn't be my #1 pick on the cart, to be quite frank. It's just not the type of game that I would gravitate towards for that much. However, it's an interesting premise, it's a cool looking game, and I think if you're looking for a quick pick up and play game, especially with some use of save states and stuff like that to save your progress so you don't have to start all over again every single time, you're going to find a good bit of fun with this one. It's a pretty neat one, and the fact that people are still doing Game Boy games and trying to do this kind of action-oriented Game Boy game in this day and age, pretty freaking cool. Alright, now we go to another really cool one. Daedalus. This one's really neat. I like the premise. There's a couple of things that I don't like about it. They have sort of like a 3-day to end of game mechanic, and they're kind of like Majora's Mask had like X number of days. I'm not the biggest fan of that. It's not my favorite. However, there doesn't seem to be like a clock or day-night cycle. So the day seems to end whenever you go back to your house and you go to bed. The premise is that you have a nightmare in the middle of the night, and this monster is up over your bed. And it basically says, hey, I've given you guys enough life. I'm coming to kill everybody in 3 days. So the whole point of this is for you to put together what's going on and save everybody inside 3 days. It's got a really interesting style. It's kind of like part old school Game Boy RPG, kind of Pokemon type look with the way the characters are designed. It's really cute. It's really fun. It hits all of the nostalgia vibes. Like all the Game Boy nostalgia vibes you could think of, this thing ticks like every single box for me. I love the aesthetic. I like how it moves and plays. I like how the screen scroll. They did a lot of really good work here to give me a Game Boy style RPG that's also got some nice horror undertones in it. The main problem I have with this one is, again, if you have a way to emulate, it's free. You can get it for free. The guy just wanted to show off his work, and he wanted to make a game for the Game Boy. And I think you might still be able to get a physical card for this for the Game Boy if you choose, but you can also just download it, emulate it, or throw it on any other handheld system that you do emulation on, or and a flash card or something like that that you can plug into your Game Boy. You can just have it. He has no problem with that whatsoever. I'm sure he's got a way for you to donate money, but from what I could see, he just wanted everybody to be able to play his game, which is awesome and laudable. And I'm glad it's on the cart, because it brings more notice to a game that should probably already have more notice, that wasn't getting the play that it probably should. So it gives it more exposure. But it also seems a little that now I've seen 2 of the 12 or so games that's on this cart that I can play for other ways for free. And for some reason, that's starting to bug me in the back of my head a little bit with this cart. I still, at this point, really enjoy the cart, and I like the selections of games I've had so far. So far, there's enough games on here that I would handily recommend the cart anyway. My main caveat being that if you have other ways to play these, or you emulate, you have 3 ways to play 2 of the games I like the best on the cart so far. Yeah. I'm hoping things get a little more exclusive or a little more rare moving forward on this, because that concerns me a little bit with recommending this cart off the top of my head, I'll be honest. Now let's look at another one that, I'd say this one's growing on me. It's not my absolute favorite on the cart. It's called Debtor. Now, this basically follows what looks to be sort of like a mob boss or enforcer kind of guy who gets a phone call while he's out on a jog and then seems to fall over dead. No real explanation other than that he just seems to fall over dead. And then he's in what I can only think of as like maybe purgatory. Like, it doesn't look like hell, but it doesn't look like heaven. It doesn't really look like he's alive. We're not really seeing much other than like coins and things laying around. And the premise is basically it's a puzzle platformer. You can headbutt, you can drop bombs, you can jump. The idea is to collect all of the coins or items on the particular stage within a given time limit and get your way to the exit, because the exit won't open up until you pick up the items. So it's very much, again, almost like a side-scrolling Adventure of Lolo kind of game, where you have to pick everything up, a doorway will open, you go through the doorway, and then you're on to the next stage. This one's actually a bit more challenging than Alien Cat 2. I found myself getting stuck trying to figure out exactly where I needed to move things more times. And if you move things into a bad spot, you can actually kill yourself, like you can in Adventure of Lolo, to reset the stage. Which is good, because there's going to be a lot of times where you're messing around with this, even in early stages, where you're just not quite seeing the solution, and you'll move something into a bad spot, and you'll just get yourself stuck. And there's nothing you can do other than wait out the clock and get killed, or to insta-kill yourself. And it's just faster to kill yourself than that, because I would have to do that in Adventure of Lolo anyway, because there was no timer. You would just be sitting there going, well, what now? So they conveniently put a way for you to basically just end the stage and restart without having to actually do the restart. And so you're going to have, like, I want to say it's like 2 or 3 lives to be able to make it through the game. Once you figure out a stage, it's generally pretty easy to get back through the stage, and pretty much most of the challenge at that point is gone. And that's how most of these puzzle platformers are. A lot of them aren't really relying on the platforming being the real key element that hinders your progression. They're more or less trying to make you figure out exactly where you need to place things specifically, or what you need to break or blow up in order to achieve the objective. And if you do that wrong, then you're going to have to restart, and that's going to be the main challenge of the game. So from that standpoint, this one's probably worth picking up. I like this one. This one's also available on multiple platforms. It runs roughly around $2 to $3. I think at most it's $3 to pick up the game. A lot of times they'll go on like 60% sale and it's like $2. The difference between $2 and $3 to me seems negligible at best. So I would just pick it up whenever it suits your fancy. It's a fun enough game, and if you're into this kind of game, I think you'll find some fun out of this one. It doesn't control the absolute best. Sometimes I would try to jump onto something, and I would time the jump wrong, and I end up pushing something instead. And that led to some difficulty with placement of certain objects during the stages I played. But once you get used to how you need to do the jump, or the spacing to do it to get up on the objects, you shouldn't really have that problem too much unless you just forget. Overall, solid entry, solid gameplay, no real problems here. I like the art style. Hopefully the stages get a little more involved with either enemies or tricks and various different traps and stuff as you move along to keep the challenge level consistent through the rest of the game. But very solid title for the cart. I like it. Now we're coming to one of the ones I was actually the most curious about on the cart from the get-go, because I had seen a lot of this from the retro community off and on as people got their physical copies of it, and that's Doodle World. Now, this was a game that was inspired by a father watching his daughter basically doodle on a notepad. So he designed an entire game based off some of her artwork on the notepad, with the backdrop looking like the back of a piece of paper. So as you go along, it's pretty much like almost somebody hand drew the scene, or a little girl or boy hand drew the scene, along with little enemies and stuff like that, some of which you can jump on, some of which you can't. The ones that you can't are usually pretty apparent. Things like, you know, pencils with sharp points and thumbtacks and things like that, that you can't necessarily jump on. You have to avoid jumping on those or get a power up, because there'll be little crayons that glow. When you grab those, you can... Basically, it's like having a starter Mario, only I think the timer's a little bit shorter, so you don't have as much time. There's two modes, the normal mode and the kid mode. I played in big boy mode. Probably should have played in kitty mode if I'm fair. It's fun. The first boss really wasn't that hard. The platforming was pretty good. The hit detection was a little spotty in times, where I thought I landed on top of something and it killed me anyway. Like, it just clipped my foot as opposed to landing directly on top of it on center. You have to make sure you're very centered when you land on enemies to kill them. Otherwise, even an eraser might kill you, just because you landed on it wrong and it didn't detect it quite right. Other than those minor complaints, this is a pretty solid game. It's nothing to look at artistically, but it was never intended to. It was always intended to look like what he designed it to look like. So it's not going for, like, any Game of the Year of award as far as, like, effects and stuff like that goes, which is fine, because it's an NES title in the first place. And it's a really well done one. It's a good, solid Mario-like platformer for you to chew your teeth on. I don't think it's going to be an exceptionally hard one if the first boss is any indicator. However, it is going to be interesting and fun and have a unique art style. And I think that's what I like the most about this game. That it was done by one person who was inspired by his daughter, built an entire game off of it, with a truly unique art style. I like this one. You should find some way to play this, whether or not you play for the ROM and the music and stuff like that on his site, or whether or not you pick it up on the Evercade cart, or look for it on another means. I don't think there were that many ways to play this outside of downloading the ROM off of his site, or other sites that sold the ROM for him, or getting it on this cart. So, this would be the primary way I would probably want to get it, because then you get a bunch of other games too. And that seems more bargain friendly to me. However, if you want to support him directly, more directly, definitely look up his website. I'll try to link that in the description. I think I still have that link. That way you guys can at least try this one out. It's worth booting up and playing through. It's cute, it's fun, it's got a good kind of vibe to it. I enjoyed it. Next up is another one I've already talked about on this channel if you follow my game mechanics series. That's Flea. I was excited to see this on the cart. This was almost as much of a big of a draw, if not more of a draw, than Doodle World. I have a thing for platformers. I like them. I also like ones that have unique mechanics. And this one has a very unique mechanic in the fact that you never stop jumping. You're always jumping. And that becomes brutally hard very early. I got 12 or 13 stages in this one during my short playtime. And it's not ultra mega hard at that point, but there's roughly 80 stages. So it's going to ramp up pretty quick. It is an insta-kill game. However, every single blood vial that you pick up on your way through the stages counts as one life as long as you can deposit it. So the trick is to not lose too many lives as you're going through the stages so that you can replenish those and more by the time you get to the next area where you can dump off some blood vials. Now, you do have a way of somewhat controlling your jump. However, most of it is based on finding the rhythm of the jump and either if you need to do longer jumps, handling it as soon as you come off of the vertical of the jump. Like as soon as you start jumping up, press forward, that way you get a longer jump and not such a high jump. Or if you need to make it underneath something, wait until you're coming down off the arc and kind of angle yourself down, because you have full control when you're in the air. The only disappointment I had in this was one of their control choices. Now, you can short your jump, but you have to spam the B button to do it. You never stop jumping entirely, it just shortens your jump. Now, I don't have a problem with that mechanic in and of itself, other than the fact that I have to spam the button. I would prefer to be able to hold the button to shorten my jump when I want to, as opposed to having to rapidly tap it. It's just a design choice in my case. The only other critique I would have in this game is the color palette's a little too similar throughout. And I understand why, because they're going for more of like a dirt and underground kind of feel to most things, so there's a lot of browns and reds and a few whites and things like that here and there. There's not a lot of brighter colors. There's not a lot of blues and bright greens and things like that. But I think that's more fitting in with the tone of the game more than anything. And it works in NES palette, and it's pretty low-key. The music's really, really good. I like it quite a lot. However, I think listening to that same tune that they have playing over and over and over again might get a little old after a while. During the stint of stages that I played, which was roughly a little less than fourth of the game, it had not really changed, I think, outside of boss music. So that one chiptune for that long could possibly get a little old. So it might be one of those that you want to mute occasionally, but the music's so playful and fun, I feel like it loses a lot of that feel that you want out of the game if you were to keep it turned off for too very long. Like something would just feel off and missing. Overall, this is a really good game. It's a very challenging game. Expect to chew on this one for quite some time before you complete it, unless you're just really good at platformers. None of the stages are super long, so once you start getting used to them, burning through them again becomes fairly quick, unless you're just not as good at a particular stage, and then you might lose a few lives and have to retry. I never really found control to be a problem in this game. It's very tight, and it needs to be in a game like this. And I feel like they nailed that perfectly. This is a cute title. This is also available on Steam. If you do not want to pick up the Evercade, or you don't have an Evercade or a VS or anything like that, and you still want to play this game, this has you interested in this game, you can pick this up on Steam. I do not think at this time this is available on either Switch, PS4, or any other platform. It's either Steam or Evercade right now. So, if you want it, those are your options. I think it's fun, but then I like a lot of old school platformers anyway. So this one's kind of on my alley. Well, I think I'm gonna have to stop here. I'm kind of running close to 30 minutes already, and I'm only halfway through this cartridge. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pause here, and I'm gonna give you the remainder of your day back, and thank all of you who got this far in the video, because this was not an insignificantly long video. And say once again, thanks for sticking around. I had a lot to say about this one, a lot more than I thought I would actually have to say on this cart. And so far, I'm really, really liking this cart. Now, I do have the second half of this coming up, which I'll probably try to work up and either get out tomorrow or sometime next week, along with another video, because I have some more stuff on the Steam Deck coming up, and I have a couple of other videos I want to work on as well. So there's a lot of stuff coming to the channel, so stick around, and if you haven't already, please like, please subscribe, do all those good things, and come back for part 2 of this, which will probably be following hot on the heels of this one. I just didn't want to do it all in one shot because I thought it'd take too much time. But anyway, till next time, happy gaming.